Hi there, good evening. I'm Dr. JOYLYN. Thank you for joining me for this free talk, How to Save Your Marriage Before It's Too Late. Just in case there might be a couple of people joining us a little bit late, so you might hear a ding or two. Don't let that disturb you. We'll just let them in and we'll keep going. So thank you, everybody who's here and ready. And I'm excited to work with you, and we'll get to how to do questions and all that. But thank you for joining me. We're going to get 3 core elements of the relationship remodeling program that will stop the pain and restore the joy and love to your relationship. All right. So you are in the right place if you're married and you're starting to think about or even talk about breaking up, getting a divorce. It's up in the air, it's on the table, but it's not what you really want. If you or your spouse has already decided to separate and you are trying to prevent getting divorced, you're in the right place. If your spouse has filed for divorce but is willing to consider, or maybe it was you or your spouse have been arguing a lot, perhaps those arguments are escalating, maybe even gotten violent, and you're worried the only way to end that violence is to get a divorce. So you're in the right place, and we're going to be working on some things for you to save your marriage before it's too late. So who's talking? Hi, I'm Dr. JOYLYN. I'm a doctor of naturopathic medicine and a certified yoga life coach. So I do both life coaching and holistic medicine, and using relationships, looking at that as a symptom of health and disease, and the relationship system that can be healthy or diseased. I'm a creatrix. I am a director of the Happiness Clinic. That's the coaching practice that I run. I'm a relationship alchemist. I specialize in relationship dynamics and communication, and I'm also a happiness facilitator, making relationships and happiness easier to come by. And I'm also a person. I'm a woman that's been in a lot of relationships. Some of them were pretty horrible, and even the one, my marriage that is now happy, had a pretty tough start there for a couple of years, and we've worked our way out and now growing happily together. What we're going to learn today is how to get your partner to start listening to you and to keep listening to you without you having to be pushy or nagging. We're going to get the instant relationship reframe technique that brings positivity back into your marriage for both of you, and a fast and proven way to reestablish broken trust even if you or your partner has lied or cheated. Before we get started real quick though, I'm just going to lay this out there. Everything I'm about to teach you is proven to work. It's worked for me. It's working for my clients. Going from near divorce or a quick trajectory in that direction to turning it around and having happy stories, more fulfilling life, greater connection and partnership. I have a program where I work one-on-one with women to help them save their marriages and do that without losing themselves, actually gaining more self-confidence and their marriage flourishing from that. And I would like the opportunity to work with you if we're a good fit. So at the end of this, I'm going to tell you how to book a free consultation to discuss your situation and see if we're a good fit. And yes, it's okay if you don't want to contact me. I'm not going to hassle you or run around and follow you behind and say, wait, you've got to try it. Your time will come. You'll make the choice. It's totally up to you, and I respect that. So here we go. If you have a question I want you guys to ask, just type the question in the little chat box, and I'll go ahead and address it as we move along. So let's get going. One final note is, if you are looking for a community, for an actual conversation, maybe for a little extra support, join the Facebook group Relationship Real Talk with Dr. JOYLYN. It's a community for people working through things just like you. And I have a private group coaching every Wednesday at noon, the Power Hour, that is yours, where you can submit your questions and I can actually talk about them in a Facebook Live. You can put the questions in there live, or you can send them ahead of time if you watch the replay. But then you get a little bit more individualized, personalized attention there. And that's a really good resource for you as well. So here we go. How do you get your partner to start listening to you or to keep listening to you without being pushy or nagging? And I'm going to show you how he won't even know you're doing it. So here's what you've tried that probably hasn't worked. Asking more frequently or more forcefully. Expressing irritation or anger when you have to ask for things that are obvious or when he doesn't do what you asked. Justifying your request. Telling him how you feel so that he knows how he's affecting you. Or only asking for small things maybe you've given up altogether. So why that's not going to work and why that's never going to work is when you begin asking more frequently or more forcefully, you set the wrong tone. That's what Dr. John Gottman at the Love Lab in Seattle calls harsh startup. It's almost like creating an obstacle to even having somebody listen to you. You can tell when you even call somebody on the phone that if they answer in a pleasant voice, hello, how are you? You're invited to continue interacting. But if somebody says, yeah, what do you want? You're tempted to just stop there. The same applies when you are requesting something from your husband. If you start with a really brash tone, a really drawn facial expression, you're setting the wrong tone to where he doesn't even want to listen any further. So your request might not even get made, or the fight already starts there. If you express irritation or anger when you have to ask for things that you think are obvious, you actually set yourself up for failure and disappointment. Expectations. When something is obvious to you and you think they should already see it, anytime there's a should lurking, you know an expectation is present. And expectations kill joy and contribution. And why they're a setup for failure, for one, what is obvious to you is very likely not obvious to your husband. A very large part of this is our gender and cultural training. We are actually just trained, programmed, and trained and modeled to pay attention and look at different things so that what might be obvious to you actually easily escapes the attention of your partner and vice versa. But if you think that they're obvious and they should already notice it or do something about it, when they don't, you're already predisposition to be disappointed and frustrated. If you are expressing irritation and anger when he doesn't do what you ask, you actually decrease cooperation and increase resistance. Again, this lends itself partly to the harsh startup. But if you expect compliance, you've actually gone from requesting into demanding and commanding. And a basic human need is autonomy, the ability to be in control of one's own self, of their time, of their thoughts, and make choices. And if you start expecting and demanding and commanding, you create a power dynamic that takes that away, and you will have immediate resistance happen. So that's what happens when you put out front your irritation and anger. This also kind of justifying the request will also do this. It is a female pattern to justify a request, and that is to validate that you're even asking for help. It's making a list. I've done all of these things today. I've done 3 loads of laundry. I'm working on the dishes. I've had to stop everything and go get Jimmy from soccer practice. Could you just do this thing? And your tone is harsh. There's, an accusation like they should have already done something. There's an expectation there. But there's also like this case building of why it's okay for you to even ask. And because there is such a defensiveness from us as far as needing to validate, like it's not even okay to ask your partner for something, that also will increase resistance. If you are telling your partner how you feel so that he knows how he's affecting you, you actually begin to confuse the issue, dilute the request, and make your request unclear. When you put in a whole lot of emotional information in there, you're doing two things. For one, you are putting a lot of emotional information in there to where your husband is no longer clear if he needs to support you emotionally or if he's supposed to actually complete a task. And when it comes to a man, he would much rather have a task that he can complete and satisfy you and show that he's done and contributed to you. Emotional things are a little bit harder. But if there's all of that emotional information, usually that comes before your request so that he's not actually sure what it is. But also with all this information about your emotional state, there's a great likelihood that it is going to be naming the frustration, the disappointment, the irritation, the anger. That's going to be part of the harsh startup. But it's also just time consuming, and you actually start to wear on the human attention span and actually put so much information and time between when you started to when you actually asked, your listening actually decreases. So they're just not even hearing it. Now, if you are now only asking for small things or have given up even asking, you're assuming noncompliance. And that actually diminishes confidence and trust. It's diminishing confidence in your ability to ask and receive. It's diminishing confidence in your partner that they're a person that would like to contribute to you. And in some cases, this actually kind of circles back and shows that we have a value or a priority, an investment in martyrdom, and a poor me attitude that is maybe staying in place longer than it should. So what can you do instead? I call it sweeten the tart. So the first thing you have to do is a little bit of internal work, and you need to get clear on what you're asking for. What is the actual outcome that you would like to see? What would you like to hear or see done or have happen? And then when you're clear on that, call your partner by name. You can use a pet name that is likely to elicit support. Lover, hero, stud. Sometimes I even use tall person, but I say it in a cute way because I need him to reach up taller than me. If your relationship is at a tough where there's strain and you don't have a pet name or you are working on just not having a harsh tone, call him by name. When you call someone by name, for one, it's like music to their ears, but it automatically, instantly humanizes them and lets them know that you see them as a person. And it also equalizes the playing field and lets them know that you are now seeing him as a person, respecting him, no longer demanding, but requesting. The name is magical. Then make your request, and it's going to be clear. You can tell them how it will contribute. Tell them how it will make your life easier if you know. And then stop there. You're going to keep it simple, sweetheart. Okay, there's no information about how you feel, about how irritated you may have been in the past, any kind of validation or case building for why it's okay for you to ask. You're just going to call him by name and make your request and possibly tell him how it will contribute to you. And then say thank you when he does fulfill your request. Here's why this works. It softens the tone. You're no longer leading with negative emotions. There's not the case building and defensiveness and insecurity and validation of justifying your request. You're simplifying the communication. You've done the upfront work of knowing what it is you've liked. You're leaving the emotional information out of it, so your request is concise and it's very clear. You decrease resistance and defensiveness because perhaps you're no longer being defensive and trying to justify your request. That brings the defensiveness down. Because you're calling him by name, humanizing him, and showing him that you're not trying to dominate or change the power dynamic, that reduces the defensiveness as well. And then it works. It actually works. So you are encouraged to continue working this way. And now you have a new way to communicate with each other. And then when you say thank you, what you appreciate appreciates. A lot of us, your husband included, I'm sure there's a great likelihood that you don't feel appreciated or taken for granted or something. Your husband probably feels this way too, to where he actually probably is trying to come through for you, but you're not recognizing it, or the request wasn't clear, so he didn't come through with what you really wanted. But when you say thank you, they feel appreciated and then they want to do more for you. So this really works. So if you sweeten the tart, you feel heard, you feel appreciated, and you become a team together. Again, when I was putting this together, I was like, oh, this thing sounds like such a pop psychology little trick. But when our relationships have deteriorated to this extent, we start to feel unheard, even though a lot of it's because our communication isn't clear. But if we start to feel unheard, we personalize it and add descriptive narrative to it, and then start to believe that we're unloved or that our partner is unloving. So sometimes if we can clarify our communication, make our requests clear, and we see that when we do that, they actually do contribute, our confidence in our ability to count on our partner, on our ability to get what it is that we'd like, our ability to communicate effectively, that all grows, and we actually then have more confidence in ourselves and each other, and that builds trust and connection. So a couple of questions that have come up. I had someone on Facebook, I have a blog about this very topic, and she said, why is it always up to the woman to do this? And the short answer is, it's not. There is no rule that says this is a women's formula. Women use this for men. Men can use this too. Speaking somebody's name and humanizing them is just, that's good for any relationship. The reason that it's geared towards women is because women are the ones that usually reach out for help and are in this group signing up for the free talk. And so you have the tools available. Also, there's a paradigm shift about leadership in relationship and what it's looking like. And so it's not that it is up to the woman. It's not that she should or she has to. But now she has the tools, and if she uses them, things change and her life gets better. So it's really just up to whoever is going to be brave, be bold, and lead the way, change the course of the relationship, get it off the rocks and into clear waters. How do I know what to call him or her? If you have it and you call them a pet name that is likely to elicit cooperation. It might even be fun to come up with a new one. But if you're not at that level, it's just too uncomfortable, it's just a little too tense at the moment, then just use their name. And what is different about this is, like I said, you're softening the tone, you're decreasing the resistance, you're showing appreciation, and it actually works. It's very elegant in its simplicity. And it really does work. The example I have that was so clear to me is I used to work in a corporate office. So I had the regular daily grind and I'm getting ready for work. And as usual has been my habit since about, the first or second grade, I hit snooze a lot. So on this particular morning, I'm curling my hair and knowing that I don't have enough time to make coffee and walk the dog and get everything done in order to get to work on time. And my husband works events, so he's away, and then when he's home, he's off. And so he's sawing logs in the bedroom while I'm getting ready for work. And for some reason that day, that was irritating to me because, again, I thought it was so obvious that it would be really nice if he helped me out and made coffee for me that morning. And I didn't make this request. It wasn't clear. And the week before, I think I'd had a very similar thing. Like I said, snoozing is quite my habit. Um, but that instance a week earlier did not go well. It was, yeah, I went out the door without coffee, needless to say. So I wanted to do it different. And I had just, I think, written the blog on this or something, and I reread it the night before I was editing something. But I was just like, I'm just gonna do it. Like, I was irritated, so it's not like it was always the first thing that came to mind. But I was like, I've got to do something different. And so I just went in the bedroom and I laid on top of him and I gave him a kiss and I said, "Hey, lover, would you make me coffee?" And he turned and looked at me. He said, "I'd love to." And he was out of bed in 30 seconds. He was better than me about not hitting the snooze button. He was up and making me coffee, and I got to leave that morning with a warm cup of coffee and get to work on time with a kiss from my lover sending me out the door. It was amazing. It actually worked so easily. I was actually surprised. It really almost caught me off guard about how effective it was, to where we use it all the time, and this has changed how we communicate with each other and how we make requests of each other. It's so much simpler and it's so much easier to come through for each other when the communication is clear, and then you get a thank you at the end as well. So, any questions on that from this group? I think we're clear for now. I don't see anything coming in the chat. So, the instant relationship reframe technique that quickly brings positivity back into your marriage and more ease into your life. So here's what you've probably done that didn't work or isn't working. Talking about what you don't like, what you don't want, what you don't have, or what you would like to avoid. Trying to fix what isn't working. Trying to prevent the reoccurrence of a past failure or heartbreak. Getting clear or being completely clear on what it is he needs to fix or work on. Or perhaps assuming innocence or powerlessness, like it's out of my hands are tied, there's nothing I can do here. Now here's why that isn't working and why it's not going to work. When you talk about what you don't like, what you don't want, what you don't have, or what you would like to avoid, or even trying to prevent the reoccurrence of a past heartbreak, all of your focus is on the past. Because even if there is something that you're presently not liking, wanting, or dealing with, it's coming from past choices and some things that you can't change. You do just have to deal with what's there. And so to continue to talk about that actually puts a lot of energy and your focus on the past of what's already happened. And if most of you, if you drive, you know that if you look in the rear view mirror, you're going to crash into something. You're either going to end up going on one side of the road or the other, or just crash in front of something because you're not paying attention, because all your energy and gaze and focus is in what's behind you. It just doesn't work to effectively get you where you'd like to be. Now, when you talk about what you don't like, what you don't want, what you don't have, and what you would like to avoid, you also undermine your confidence in yourself and in your partner. For one, your partner is aware, even sometimes just energetically, when you're criticizing them and talking them down and reminding them constantly about how they're not coming through for you. And what's unfortunate is most of us women have this as a model, a generosity of criticism and constant criticism and critique. And that will undermine your partner's confidence in himself, in his ability to come through for you, and not even feel super enthusiastic about the relationship. But it also undermines your confidence in yourself, because you are always in conversation with your subconscious, and your subconscious is recording everything that you say. So that when you talk about how bad things are, in some way, your subconscious is recording that and trying to make sense of that. And that's either because something's wrong with you, or because you make bad choices, or you don't deserve much. Somehow it's going to come up with some self-defeating narrative that makes sense of why your life is showing up like this and why that's your focus. And also, when you keep talking about things that you don't like and you don't want and what you don't have and what's missing, You put energy into that, and more of that shows up, which is what you don't like and what you don't have and what's missing. And that undermines your confidence because it makes you feel powerless, like nothing's ever changing. How come nothing ever changes? So you even self-sabotage, and drive yourself into the ground that way. When you try to fix what isn't working, you put all your energy and attention into the problem. Now, let me tell you, I used to be good at this because I'm a problem solver. Okay, so if there was a problem, I can solve it. And this reality actually really reinforces and rewards us for that approach. And we have been trained to think that our bodies are like cars and our brains are like computers, so that you can just troubleshoot some sort of linear system. And if you find the problem, you fix it, and then the system works. But it doesn't actually work that way. For one, we're not linear systems. We are way more complex than that. So it's not so easy as to just switch out components and things get better. I mean, you hopefully even know that about your relationship. You can't just easily switch out partners and then everything, your life is great. But also, because we are creative beings, when we put our energy and attention into something, that's creative energy. So that if you focus and fixate on what needs fixing, there always is more to fix showing up. So it's almost like the whack-a-mole. As soon as you fix something, something else to fix pops up. It just doesn't work. Now, when you are super clear on what he needs to fix and the work that he needs to do, you create antagonism and opposition between you two. You're no longer working together. How are we going to create this relationship? How are we going to get this to work? We, us together. I've separated the system into components, and now it's a you versus me. Very opposition and antagonistic. It also avoids responsibility and actually diminishes your own power to be part of the solution, or very conveniently dismissing your contribution to the problem that you very much have the power to control and change. So that when you assume innocence or powerlessness, you really are just sidestepping your responsibility, which might allow you to not feel so bad about yourself, but it actually diminishes your ability to change the whole dynamic, to no longer contribute to the problem, but then, take that part away and be more of a contribution to the solution. You really are a very important and powerful part of this relationship. So what can you do and what should you do instead is this relationship reframe. Talk about things that are going well, that make you feel good. And when I say make you feel good, I mean like light, bubbly, vital, happy to be alive, smiling, effervescent, those kind of uplifting energies. Good and right are not the same. Sometimes we do prefer to feel superior or self-righteous, but that's not the same as feeling good. But when you talk about things that are going well, things that make you feel uplifted, talk about the future that you'd like to have, not the past that you'd like to heal or what you want to avoid. And here's an important thing to notice, not a future you wish for. Anytime you wish for something, it stays in the future and you can't have it. It's like a carrot on a string. Wish is a word that really actually is destructive for us, but it's kind of put out there as a happy, positive word. But when talk about the future that you'd like to have, that you're working on creating, that's getting closer to you and that is possible and attainable. But you talk about what it is you'd like to create and generate and put energy on that future. Talk about your partner in a way that exalts you. Change the conversation you're having with your subconscious. Now, it's not that they have to be the greatest thing since sliced bread or completely perfect, because nobody's perfect and we all know this, but start focusing on the positive attributes, the characteristics that you like and enjoy, the things that they do well, the things that they do contribute to you. Because when you start focusing on that, for one, your partner is going to be aware of positive attention, and then they are going to feel more affectionate and loving towards you. But if you talk about when your partner is good and wonderful and contributory, you start telling your subconscious, I'm worthy. I deserve a good person. I'm a good person because I get to attract a good person, and I make good choices, and I select people who lift me up, make me laugh, help me with the kids, whatever it is. But start talking about your partner in a way that exalts you. Use I messages. What a lot of us have ended up doing is when we're talking to our partner, because we are so aware of what they need to do, a lot of our sentences start with you. You know what you need to do. You know what your problem is. You should really do this. You need to think about this. And we really, that they come off, it's a very accusatory way of speaking. And it will immediately create resistance and defensiveness. But it also means that you are so involved and plugged into their universe that you get mad at them because where am I in this relationship? Well, you're not even with you in your relationship because you're not very aware of what it is that you like, the outcome that you would like to have, the future that you're going for, what lights you up and feels good. So that when you start using iMessages, you have to become more aware of your own self, how your own emotional state, your priorities, your values. But then when you can communicate that and say, I value this, this is my priority, there's a lot less defensiveness, a lot less barrier, more vulnerability. So you actually are easier to connect with and more inviting to connect with that way. And when you say thank you more often, again, what you appreciate appreciates, so that just common courtesy can actually go a long way with rebuilding bridges to connect each other. So, already getting ahead of myself, why this works. When you shift your focus away from the past, off of the problems, and you start to prioritize the future and your blessings, the contributions, and the solutions that are available, that's a super powerful shift. You change your message to the subconscious about who you are, what you deserve, and what it is you're looking for, what it is you're putting your energy and attention on that you can have more of in your life, because that's your creative power. You get clarity on you, your thoughts, your feelings, and you're more vulnerable and less, you create less resistance and defensiveness when you're speaking in iMessages. And gratitude is the alchemizer. If you want to turn lead to gold in this relationship, gratitude will do it. What you appreciate, appreciate. Say thank you for everything that they are contributing to you, and say thank you to yourself for all that you do. Also start acknowledging yourself. And when you start to do this, you're going to get positive attention for your fresh content and your positive attitude. You're not going to be the negative Nelly. You're not going to be talking about the same old story or beating the dead horse in your arguments. It's all going to be new because you're talking about a future that you are in the process of creating that hasn't happened yet. So it's hard to have that be old. That's, you're not going to the past. When you're more positive, when you're more vulnerable, you're easier to connect with, more inviting to be around. So you're going to get more affection from your partner and recognition for your contributions and as well as theirs. So this really actually works. Powerful shifting here. And this is the shift, the instant reframe. It's just the empowering language. Feel good about your relationship and be happy with your partner. And it's just how you're talking to yourself, to your partner, about yourself and your partner. So some questions. Do you guys have any questions before I go into these? Okay. What if I need to vent? because we are at a point where we're trying to save this relationship. So there are instances that are highly emotionally charged. What if I just have to vent? I don't want to speak to the problem. I don't want to speak to the past. I don't want to make it worse, but this is up in the air and it's big. What do I do? So when it's just about paying attention to the energy, venting is just that. It's going to be a release and a discharge of emotional energy so that the intensity decreases. So that when you're venting, what's going to be key is finding somebody who is available and can be objective and give you space to vent. You're going to notice when you talk that as you talk, your body starts to relax a little bit. Perhaps you start slowing down when you're talking. Your breath might slow. The gasps in between your tears will space out a little bit more. And at the end of the conversation, you'll feel like you have a little bit more space to breathe. That's venting. Now, you will notice sometimes that when you tell somebody the story about what happened in your argument the other night, that you re-trigger yourself and you are amped and mad again. You're not venting at that point. Now you're actually just reinvesting in the old story. That is, if you notice that, pay attention to that. That means you're back into your habitual pattern, and you just have to do your utmost and put the effort into just stopping there, stopping mid-sentence, taking note of how contracted and heavy and tight your breathing is, because that's what this habit actually puts us in. That's the habit we're working to break. So how do you know if you're venting versus retriggering? You have to pay attention. Your body will let you know. If you are getting yourself all amped and charged again, you have to stop. And that will take a lot of effort. But if you can stop, do say thank you and acknowledge and celebrate yourself, because that is changing the habit pattern. If you're venting and you're discharging, also enjoy the release and know that things are passing and already starting to change. Now, some of us will feel like we're lying when we talk about good things that happen in our life or saying anything nice about ourselves. Yes, that is my history. We were taught that basically saying anything complimentary about yourself was conceit and arrogance, and that was very looked down on ourselves. I don't know if that's everybody's training. That was definitely mine. So that to say things nice about myself at first felt uncomfortable. And then, as much as I hate to admit it, I was a chronic complainer. And so it was easy for me to find things that needed to be critiqued, what wasn't right, try to continue to fix things, being aware of, and I was self-critical too. So I was aware of what he needed to change, also aware of what I needed to change, but I would just talk about that and not do a lot. So that when I first had to change what I was talking about, there were some times I just felt awkward because I just didn't know what to say at all. It just felt fake. So it's okay if you actually have a little bit more quiet time where you're not talking. That's okay. That's part of the process. But also, if you feel like you're lying, just check in. Are you actually saying something that isn't true? Or does it just feel a little bit unnatural or uncomfortable because it's different? Because changing your habit, getting out of a habit, will just feel different. And our habitual, egotistical way of thinking and being is going to say, this isn't right. So just check in. If you're not lying, you just recognize, it's just new, it's just different. It's okay. And what's different about this is these are subtle shifts that actually have very powerful effects on our subconscious. And when we change ourselves and our part of the relationship, we fundamentally change the entire dynamic of our relationship. So this is really, really powerful. And does it actually work? It does. And I use a really simple story to highlight this. I had a client, and in our first conversation, I knew everything that her husband needed to work on and all the things that he had done. And, you know, I know that I did this too. This is, but I was like, well, you're here. you're the one on the phone and the one that is here to work. So we're going to work on you because that's what you have the power to actually change. She was receptive to this. She was an awesome client. And all she did for the first 2 weeks was start paying attention to how often she said the word should and how often she said the word you in her head or spoken out loud. Because a lot of what she was trying to communicate, she really did love her husband. It's just their communication had degraded to such a point. It was so frustrating and unproductive that they were spending so much time in argument. Her job was suffering, and she was an entrepreneur trying to build a business. So that was tough. And it was really just, she wanted things like help with the kids, for him to start taking better care of himself, go to the doctor, start exercising, eating a little bit better, those kind of things. But it had become a very nagging pattern to where he just shut her down. It wasn't that. So all she did was pay attention to those two things: how often she said should, how often she started talking with you. And she was like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I can say anything for a while. Like almost everything had one of those two words or both. You should was a common conversation starter. And it wasn't even a month into coaching where, I call for a session and she says, you wouldn't believe it. He just asked me for the number for the eye doctor. She's like, I have been asking for over a year for him to make an appointment to get his annual health check and get some of these things going. She's like, I haven't talked about it in weeks, and he asked me. And it really, the whole dynamic of their relationship shifted just by changing how they talk to each other. And she didn't have any control about how he was going to respond. She just worked on herself, and it really did change the whole relationship. So the fast and proven way here to reestablish broken or damaged trust, even in the most difficult situations. What you may have done that probably did not work is talking about the charged situation, the problem, or asking to talk about it. Badgering, arguing, yelling, making threats. Maybe going the opposite direction and holding things in, not talking, stonewalling or leaving the conversation. Crying, throwing things, or otherwise expressing your feelings when you don't feel heard or that you're not being listened to. Maybe even getting to threatening or attempting self-harm or harming another. Maybe you are quiet long enough to listen, but you're really only listening to respond or listening so that he will listen to you. So here's why that's not working and why that's not going to work. When you continue to turn a conversation to what's wrong, or if you use the very unmagical words, can we talk, you elicit the escape reflex. Men hate the words, can we talk? And most people, men and women, do not just want to hear a conversation where they already know they've already had it before and don't know how to work around it. So if you are hitting on an escape reflex where somebody just wants to run away, they don't want to talk, you're going to spend so much energy into coercing, controlling, or trying to convince them. If you're badgering, arguing, yelling, or making threats, or if it's your partner that ends up communicating that way, you know that the one who yells the loudest is usually the least likely to be heard. But badgering, arguing, yelling, threatening, those are actually behaviors that trigger a trauma pattern and trauma reactions. And when somebody is triggered and goes back into a trauma response, they actually then, whether it's him or you, are now behaving at the age emotionally of when that trauma happened. It might be a trauma you're aware of, it might not. But this is why a lot of conversations go nowhere, is because it's not two adults having a conversation. It's usually two children, because pretty much everybody has some sort of trauma or emotional wound. And when that gets triggered, we are operating at that age. And if we are talking emotional wounds, there is no amount of intellect or intelligence that can rationalize you out of that feeling. And it's also a very survival. That trauma is when you're in some way question whether or not you were going to be able to live through something, an emotional situation that was so overwhelming that it did trigger a part of your brain that is wired into the survival. So that's why some of these conversations degrade so quickly. Now, if you're holding things in, not talking, stonewalling, or walking out, these behaviors communicate mistrust and even contempt. But these two can elicit a trauma reaction. If anyone has an experience or fear of abandonment, uh, not talking, being left, or in any way being able to interpret something as being left, that will put them back into that emotional trauma response. And the reason we can't go through this is because maybe as an adult brain, it might have been that you were left in a mall when you were 4. And as an adult, maybe you've processed it and now your parents were only 10 feet away. But if you're 4 and you can't find any face you're familiar with, that world looks pretty scary and you don't feel safe. You can't use your adult brain to just say, stop feeling it, it doesn't make sense. There is definitely a way to heal it that we can do in coaching, but it's not through just using your logical brain. Now, if you're crying, throwing things, dramatically expressing your feelings when you don't feel heard, threatening or attempting self-harm or harming another, this is manipulative and controlling. Now, whether it's you or your partner that's doing this, it's not about judging this behavior. You're manipulative. You're trying to control me. This is a time to also recognize that this level of manipulation and control is also often driven by trauma, and it's a response or a reaction to that trauma. When you felt so out of control and unable to handle the situation that you were in, a lot of your life is built in then on trying to control everything. But if you're doing it in this way, you're not healing, you're not getting better, and you're actually potentially re-triggering yourself or triggering your partner and further deteriorating the situation. If you're listening to respond or just listening so that he'll shut up and listen to you, that's what I call a gift with strings attached, and that will lead to resentment and mistrust. People know when you have an ulterior motive. It's the thing that we can sense. Almost everybody's waiting for, what's the bottom line? What's the catch here? And if there is one, you've blown your trust. And if that's what you're trying to rebuild, you're not going to get very far. So it's not going to work. So what do you do instead is listen. And here's the how of listening. You got to be quiet. You can't listen if you're talking. Now, mind you, this is also to yourself. Like I said, almost all of us have some emotional wound that we still are working with or working through. And healing is like a balm or a salve to a wound. It is such a powerful healing agent. We can actually offer that gift and be that healing agent for ourselves, but we can't do it if we're constantly talking, including mental chatter about telling ourselves how we should be fine, and it doesn't make sense to feel what we're feeling. So even if you're applying this to yourself, be quiet. Stop talking so you can actually listen. Be open. Don't assume you know what they're going to say. Be willing to receive whatever it is that they say. Again, even if it's you, it might surprise you what kind of information becomes available, how simple it might be, the miscommunication that it is. You might become aware that it's a simple misunderstanding that's just been blown out of proportion, or you might become aware of feelings that have been hidden for a long time. But don't assume you know. Be open to getting all the information. And then be quiet some more. It's okay if you don't have an immediate response. That's actually part of how we know that we're not just doing our automatic programmed response. Don't rush them, because it's also okay if they don't have an immediate response either. Give them space. This is part of building trust. When you can give them space, not rush them, they start to become aware you're actually giving them a gift of space and listening. This, not rushing them, will actually, by itself, start building the trust. And then be honest. If your intent is to rebuild trust together, figure out how you're going to get through this together, turn the relationship around, and you know that listening is necessary and you'd like to be there, maybe what they're saying brings up a lot of emotional charge that you know your ability to listen is no longer there. You just want to react. You just want to turn off, and you're aware of that. You're hurting too, and your pain's going to make it hard to listen. It's okay if you then say, I need some time to process this so that I'm not so charged. And you're being honest that way and saying, hey, I want to listen. I want to work on this with you. I want to figure out how to do this together. I just need a couple of minutes, 10 minutes, half hour, 2 days. You can name the time, but then say, but I will come back and we will talk about this some more, so that they know you're not just leaving and walking away. You're not abandoning them, and that you're valuing and investing in this relationship. That too, in and of itself, will build trust. And why it's working. When you're quiet and you're not shouting when perhaps you would, or you stay when maybe you usually leave, you're getting their attention, their subconscious's attention even, because you're interrupting a pattern. And that you're interrupting a pattern without negative or abusive behavior that's going to trigger and escalate the problem. When you listen, you can actually quickly correct miscommunication, inaccurate assumptions, and gain awareness and understanding of a situation or an emotional part that then what action is required becomes much clearer and easier to determine. When you listen, you're stopping the cycle of hurting and trauma and reaction and retriggering and hurting and not feeling listened to and hurting and refusing to listen and causing hurt. That whole cycle, you actually stop. You're not triggering, you're now de-escalating. And because you're stopping a programmed habitual pattern, you've opened the door to an entirely different outcome. And gifts without strings attached bridge gaps. And when you do something different, things actually change. So that if you listen, really listen, you're doing something different so you can get something different. And you can enjoy this change. Rebuild the trust. So real quick, some of the questions, because we're getting close to time. So some of the questions is, why should I listen if I'm not the one who's being listened to? That was my situation. Let me tell you, I was yelling, why can't you just listen to me? And I was so convinced it was him that wasn't listening to me. But check in. A lot of times it is us who is not listening to us. Because abuse might be so deeply ingrained and programmed, we become our own abuser and ignore us. So that when we're screaming to be heard, a lot of times it really is us that we need to listen to and who we would like to be listened to by. So you listen because you can, and because you listening will change it. If you started off well, but then you got mad and interrupted, call yourself out on it. Admit it. Hey, I was doing really well. I got charged. I got distracted. I fell back into my pattern. I'm sorry. And you can either say you have the floor now and start the listening again, Or if you're really emotionally charged, you can say, I need a few minutes and I'll be back. But the more you can be aware and honest about your process, and if you mess up, and if they're the ones that call you out on it, you don't have to react and be defensive. You're learning, you're practicing something new. And the more you can be vulnerable about that and not be embarrassed by it, because you're not doing anything wrong, you're trying something new that you're perhaps not good at because we haven't been trained or have good models about listening. So that if you start off, well, got interrupted, don't judge yourself either. Just start again. What do I do if they do say the same thing that they always do? Like you said, don't assume they know, but they do. Well, take your listening to the next level. Is there something between the lines? Something that they're not saying that you can sense the energy of? Is their body language not matching what they're actually saying? And if you can just say, hey, I'm observing this, you're saying this, but this is what's happening, and it's not you're lying to me, again, it has to be about just naming the observation. Even more information might become available. And some of these things, this is your intro into a lot of this. You get a lot more in-depth conversation and practice with this in the 90-day relationship remodel program. But will this really work? It absolutely does. And one of the worst fights that we had, going at it, and again, who knows what it was about, something dumb, it always is, even, but I was like, we were going to bed angry. And I was just like, I'm a coach. I should be able to do better at this. I was doing just standard life coaching at the time, but still relationships are part of that. I was like, how am I so bad at this? I've got to be able to turn this around. And so I threw out a question trying to be like, where are we miscommunicating? What's going on? And he answered super sarcastic, just really snarky. But instead of reacting, I listened and I said, and I just reflected, which is part of listening. I just said, a response like that is usually because of pain. Are you hurting? And his whole body language, posture, everything, all the barriers came down, and he said, yes. And when you're with somebody who is so vulnerable and so honest, you'd have to try really hard to stay mad. Then you really recognize you are a person with a person you care about, and all you do is start caring about them. And that fight ended there. And it was right there that, like I said, avoiding the responsibility, acting like you're powerless and so innocent, that is the stance I had taken. I don't hurt people's feelings. I'm a nice person. I don't do that kind of thing. And I didn't think that anything I said really mattered that much. That's very ingrained from my family of origin. But he actually did care about me and let me in. And some of the things I said were hurting him. And I finally got that I was part of the problem, so that it was uncomfortable, but I was going to have to change how I was being and communicating. But that when I actually took the moment to not react and just listen, that fight ended on the dime right there. So do you guys have any questions? We're right at 8, and I'm going to get to the end part that I told you I was going to get at. So if you do have questions that come up afterwards, I'll stay just a second afterward, or you can feel free to email me. Again, get in the Relationship Real Talk group, and you can throw them in there as well. But here's a quick recap. You learned how to get your partner to start listening to you and keep listening to you without being pushy or naggy, by getting clear on what it is you'd like, and then calling him by name, making your simple request, and showing gratitude when it's fulfilled. The instant relationship reframe technique that quickly brings positivity back into your marriage for both of you is to talk about your partner and your marriage and your life in a way that lifts you up, and you begin to cultivate and express gratitude, and then start getting positive attention. The fast and proven way to reestablish broken or damaged trust, even if there's been lying or cheating, is to listen with no strings attached. So that's what you got today. And if you remember nothing else, know that there is nothing wrong with you. Any relationship problems you've had or are having are not evidence that there's something wrong with you or your partner. It's just showing you that something in the relationship, which is usually our attachment to insecurity and our communication, is no longer working and needs a change. But you have the power to change things. And it's not that you should or have to, but it's you can. And things will change if you do. And it is totally okay if you don't know what to say or do next. It's actually a good thing because it means you're not on autopilot. Those are your takeaways. So how we can work together to save your marriage is to do a 90-day relationship remodel. That's a one-on-one coaching intensive program. And it starts with a free consultation, which is just a short 15-minute conversation for us to make sure that we're a good match. No sales, no pressure, we're just going to talk. And then when you choose to move forward, we go to an intake appointment. That's your first coaching session where we're going to get really in-depth and clear on your goals, and we're going to create an action plan to make sure you reach them the fastest. Then you go into the active coaching. That's the next 11 weeks where you have all your follow-up sessions. We continue to work on building your strengths and removing and working around obstacles, improving communication, and increasing your confidence. And then we're going to be celebrating your renewed, strong marriage and your increased attention and affection from your partner. So that is how to work with me. I would love to work with you. I love doing this work and being a resource so that we can have good relationships, fun relationships, laughter in our love life, and then we start spreading joy instead of pain, and that's the movement I want to be a part of. So request your free consultation. Join Relationship Real Talk with Dr. JOYLYN Maniaci if you have some questions for this. But otherwise, I look forward to seeing you and talking to you in person at your free consultation. And thank you so much for joining me tonight. And hopefully I will be talking with you soon.